All right, we're live. Welcome back, Jessica Ethridge, to a live Q&A. Thanks again for running for Lieutenant Governor. You put your name forward. You've decided to be the face of this campaign for us, for the South Carolina Libertarian Party, and we're very, very grateful. And thank you for giving up some time here on a Sunday afternoon to try to catch some of those questions from potential voters and people that might be interested in learning more about you as a candidate. So for those people who are new to Jessica Ethridge, tell us a little bit about you, the couple things we know politically, right? And then maybe a couple things that maybe people don't know about you.
Yeah. What exactly are you thinking? I mean, because I can monologue about this. I came to the party officially in 2019. That's when I joined the party, but I've been active in the liberty movement for well over a decade. Started about the time Ron Paul made his first presidential run. That's when I, discovered the Libertarian Party, I guess. But I always, felt that message was my message, So politically orphaned because I didn't think the Republicans or the Democrats represented me well. So I found a home with the Libertarian Party.
Talk about specifically what message is it about libertarianism that resonates with you?
Personal freedom. I mean, everything comes back to personal freedom, personal liberty. And I think that's, the most important thing, that we have the right to live our lives, to do with our bodies, to manage our money, to raise our kids the way we see fit, as long as we're not doing harm and as long as we're not infringing on the rights of others. That's it,
Yep. 100%. I know. Resonates with me too. I was telling somebody today, it struck me some point, maybe over the weekend, that there are some things going around in political conversations right now that just make me think that's just none of my damn business. Like, it's just none of my business. I mean, things about whether it's about who people marry and spend their lives with, who they decide to have intimacy with, what they think of their own gender, their own sexuality, like all of those things are just none of my business. I mean, I think one of the things when we talk about personal individual freedom, people don't necessarily think of it as being just mind your own damn business.
Yeah. I mean, it's I was talking with the University School Charleston this past week. I did a virtual presentation with them as part of their civics curriculum, which is actually really cool. They do it every fall. I think they said every fall. And I think they said it's a 2-year cycle. So they start like 1 year, they'll learn about the processes. And then the next year there will be an election cycle of some sort. And they have a certain group of students, like an age group, that actually goes and works at the polls. And then they have their younger students doing exit polls. But they have speakers from all the different parties, from all different positions, not just Republicans and Democrats. And so the students do their research and they have a Q&A. They can ask questions after you tell them about yourself. And it's just really, really cool because it's something that you don't often see in curriculum, because it's that deeper education about all things government and all things civics. And I just think that's really cool. But anyway, so one of the things that we were talking about in that Q&A session was exactly that. Libertarianism all comes down to something called the non-aggression principle. And that is that we reject the use of force to achieve social or political goals, right? And this idea that you go into office and you make policy based on your personal beliefs, that's not how it's supposed to be, right? Mm-hmm. So when you go into office, you're elected by the citizens that you are going to be serving, whether it's at your municipal level, at the state level, at the federal level, you are elected to serve. So you are there to look out for their interests, not your own. And oftentimes people will use their personal beliefs to drive policy. And that's just not how it's supposed to be. That's not what anyone intended for government. That's not the direction that it was intended to go, but sadly it has. And I think most often people use their religion. Like when we talk about abortion is a really good topic where people talk about religion being kind of the basis of their argument. Oftentimes
Right.
it is. And when you bring religion into a conversation around policy, a lot of people are going to immediately shut down because not everybody shares your points of view. Not everybody shares your religion. And that's something that a lot of politicians don't necessarily think about. A lot of people who are just regurgitating these talking points are not thinking about. But anyway, sorry, I went down a whole rabbit hole there, but that was
No,
one
no,
of the
no.
things we talked about was that, it's not about what I believe personally. I can tell you what I believe personally, but at the end of the day, it's my job in any elected position, in any capacity that my community chooses for me to serve them, not me. And so if what they want doesn't necessarily align with what I think is best, then I have a responsibility to represent them. And I'm not saying abandon ethics or abandon my, personal, deeply held convictions. But generally, I think on issues, there is some middle ground that people can reach, that we can reach, where you can serve the people while not abandoning those convictions or those beliefs.
Yeah, I think a really good example of that, it actually comes from the first question that we have from a voter in the Rock Hill area, which is related to government subsidies for companies. So when we think
Mhm.
about something like the Carolina Panthers building a practice facility in Rock Hill and the city of Rock Hill and the county of York, kind of bending over backwards, really the state of South Carolina bending over backwards to welcome this company, welcome this organization in. And the reports that were provided were, we know, falsified a number of different ways. The funding that was going to have to be leveraged really didn't exist. So it was a matter of raising more funds. And the fanfare that basically enabled this deal, the Panthers cheerleaders showed up on the House floor at the State House. Sir Purr was there taking pictures on the day that the vote was supposed to be had. So there was a sense of sort of sensationalism or maybe celebrity status associated with being part of this Panthers deal, but none of that represented what the citizens of Rock Hill and the citizens of York were saying about this. They weren't excited about this. They didn't want this. And yet the state kind of bulldozed ahead with it. Now, of course, we know it's a defunct project and there's all kinds of lawsuits and it's costing us a lot more money than it should have. So all of that in summary on the Rock Hill side, those kinds of things, that kind of government manipulation by corporations. What's your stand? I mean, if you go into this lieutenant governor position, part of your job will be to go around and shake hands with potential employers, with encouraging people to bring their businesses to the state. How do you keep the state out of the markets, or do you?
I think there's a fine line that we have to walk there because we want businesses to come to our state, right? We want to have those opportunities for our citizens to have more jobs, more benefits. And as we bring business here, that helps our economy, right? But we should not be doing that in a way that is dishonest. I think that, and I want to preface all of this by saying I'm not intimately familiar with the details of the Panthers stuff. I don't know enough about that specific instance to speak deeply or intelligently about it. And so I'm not going to speak on that. But in general, I will say I cannot stand lobbies. I don't like lobbies. I don't think there's any place in our government for lobbies because they are special interests. They benefit a very select few, not the citizens. And so I think that any backdoor deals in situations like that with big corporations should not be happening. If we can't do business honestly, then those aren't businesses that we would want here in South Carolina.
Right. I agree with that. I agree that if a business can't compete without leveraging the
Mm-hmm.
government to cheat the game, then the business doesn't belong. It doesn't need to
Absolutely.
exist. Yeah, they
Absolutely.
ought to be able to play fairly. I agree.
Mm.
What are some things that are important issues to you? When we had our live Q&A a couple weeks ago, or actually, I guess it's been less than a week ago. Oh my gosh, time is flying by for me.
Yeah.
It's been less than a week ago. We talked about the hot button issues that are everybody's list, right? Inflation, abortion, jobs, taxation, these kinds of things. What are the things that are you hear from voters are really important to them? And what are some things that you think are not being said? I know in terms of the lieutenant governor debates, you weren't invited to be part of those. And so
Hmm.
you've been tweeting out and using your Instagram to put your responses to some of these key issues. Why don't you share some of those with our viewers?
Whew, where do you want me to start? And the ones that we most often talk about, I think the ones that are being discussed the most, obviously, with regard to what impacts our citizens the most, is inflation, taxation. Most recently, we've had, the conversations around women's productive rights and the abortion ban that the governor would very much like to pass. And then even more recently in that debate, when our governor said he would like to ban gay marriage. So those are things that are, I think, very important. Maybe not to every South Carolina citizen, because those things don't specifically impact every South Carolina citizen. But when we start talking about taking away freedom for any subset of people, your freedom's in danger too, and it may not be the same exact freedom, but it is your freedom too. So, I think those are all things we would want to look at. I am an activist at heart. I love my community. I love to get involved. Any opportunity that I can find to do something good, I love to be a part of those things. We do that in our house. We enjoy that. I think as lieutenant governor, because that position is not one that comes with any sort of immediate pull, so to speak. Which, to be clear, I don't think any position should come with any pull or authority or leverage. Like, they're all positions of service. I say that all the time. Like, it's a position of service. That's what it was intended to be, and that's what it should be. But I think the most important thing to me immediately would be getting into the communities and looking for ways to help them solve the problems that they're currently leaning on the government to solve. And just finding ways to facilitate some solutions there. I think that there's so many things in South Carolina that we really need to fix, right? And there is no one solution to each of the problems. There are multiple solutions. And then somewhere in the middle of all of those solutions is the best possible solution for everybody, right? But the thing is that every topic impacts another topic, impacts another issue, impacts another layer. It's an onion, right? And so we just need to start working on those layers and figuring out what is the outermost layer, peel that one back, go to the next layer, and peel that one back. And, it's really hard to say because there are so many things that we need to tackle. But I think my goal as lieutenant governor would be really to start within the communities, looking at ways I could help at that level, connect people with legislature, because that's where the magic happens, right? Start, hopefully having some relationships there that would help advocate for those communities.
Yeah, and facilitate conversation. I think there's an argument to be made that those community solutions are driven by the people who are willing to do the work, right?
Mhm.
So they show up, they clean up the highway, they organize childcare, they bring needy people food and clothing and diapers and all these other kinds of things. When we go into crisis, we have a good tendency for people to come forward and give
Yeah.
of themselves to help their community. So, but unfortunately, like in regular time, when it's not a crisis, we don't see as many people that are all hands on deck and willing to give.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas about like how we could encourage more people to come out and participate? How we could get more people involved on the daily basis to see to how to solve these problems?
I think it's going to depend on the community. I think it's going to depend on the needs, and I think it's going to depend on the dynamic. There, like I said, there's no one answer for everything, right? And so I think going into the different communities, because what they need in Allendale, what they need in Hampton is not going to be the same as what they need in Greenville or Columbia or Charleston. And so, looking at what the specific issues are and then figuring out at that point, how do we encourage the community to get involved? How do we make it easy for them to get involved? Because I think a lot of times people don't want to, it's not that they don't want to. I think people hesitate to get involved because they aren't sure where to start, how to start, and they're worried that they're not going to have enough to give, right? But we all know it doesn't matter if you can give of your time. If you don't have money, give a little bit of your time. If you don't have time and you don't have money, there's another way, and I think figuring out what that is to encourage communities. And you can mobilize through other organizations, working within faith communities, working within other groups, support groups and things like that. So just figuring out, I think, on a community by community basis, based on the needs and based on the dynamics of those communities, is important, because there is no one size fits all.
Yeah, we have a tremendous organization here in South Carolina called Together SC. And in Together SC, they are attempting to create a statewide network of all the nonprofits, so that people know like what the nonprofits are, what they do, who they serve, how they serve, those kinds of things. So when we think of the idea that individuals can be involved in their community, you don't have to serve on a board. You don't have to be involved 24 hours a day. You don't even have to show up every single week. You can pick one event per month. You can pick, one thing per quarter that your family is going to do to participate in the community and go out and help in the community. And if everybody was doing a little bit, then nobody would have to do a whole lot, right? So get government out of the way, because citizens can move at a faster speed and be more agile like that.
Yeah. And I think it's hard too. One of the challenges, at least one of the challenges that I've seen, is it can be really overwhelming when there are a lot of needs, because oftentimes it's really easy to feel like if everything is not important to you, then nothing is important to you. And I think that happens a lot in our society, as divided as we are, as polarized as we are. It's like if you don't support one thing, then you don't support anything, right? But we all have our individual talents. We all have our individual passions. And so if there's something that you are passionate about, that you have time or money or some other resources to invest in a solution for that particular matter, then that's where you spend your time. And no one should ever make you feel guilty for not participating in something else, because what's important to me is not necessarily what's going to be important to you, Casey. And what is super important to you isn't always going to be super important to me. But the thing is, what is important to me is important to me. What is important to you is important to you. And if we use our time and resources on those things, then we're each making a tremendous impact.
Agreed. And those impacts at our local level quickly become impact at a county level, at a state level, and they make a difference for the better. Let's talk education for just a couple minutes. So this community solutions piece is part of your approach to education. And I had some interesting brainstorming happening over the weekend where I was thinking about how funding is allocated for education and how it's managed inside education. I was thinking about those memes. Have you seen the ones that say like babysitter pay? I'll take that. And it says like $10 per kid per hour. And then it's like for however many hours a day, for however many, days during the week. And then it basically comes up with like a $300,000 salary for a teacher if the teachers are just babysitters, right? This is hyperbole. It's extensive. It's a little bit crazy. But when I started thinking about the amount of money, the government contractor rate for in in-person instruction is $125 an hour. So if you think that teachers are worth $125 an hour for in-person instruction, 4 hours a day, 5 days, just 4 hours a day. I mean, they're on campus for 8, right? They usually have the kids for 6. So if you just give them just the 4 hours a day rate at $125 an hour, it's $2,500 a week. So $90,000 a year. If you could start there, right? Start here, pay our teachers 90 grand each. And then at the end of the day, at whatever money you have left over, you can apply toward administrative, you can apply toward buses, you can apply toward everything else you need, right? But let's start with paying the teachers first was kind of the brainstorm I had, which I'm sure if anybody hears this, if anybody listens to that is going to be like, wait. Like teachers should get paid whatever. That's fine. You could break it down, but we haven't even had anything as radical as that being put forward. What are some thoughts that you have or some radical ideas you have about how things could be rethought in education, how we could do a better job at education, remanage things in education?
I often get a lot of gasping when I say that I would like to see South Carolina separate from the federal Department of Education. I think that with federal money comes strings, and those strings are wrapped around us so tightly that we are no longer able to serve the students. We're not able to do what that system is intended to do. I've said it before. I am a libertarian who does not fully hate the public school system. I think that there is a place for a public school system, but I think that it needs to run more like a free market, right? I think that parents need to have more of a say in where their kids are going to school and the education that they are receiving and the curriculum that is being taught to them. I think money should follow children. I mean, there are a lot of ideas that a lot of people are just like, oh, not quite ready for that yet. But I think that some really good first steps and the things that we've talked about in our campaign are, obviously we do think teachers should be paid more, right? Like they should be paid a fair wage for their skills and expertise, just like we expect to be paid a fair wage or a fair salary for our skills and expertise.
Right.
But I think that in order for that to happen, I think we need to start looking at where the money is actually being spent. Because there are, I think, a lot of costs in education that could be cut. I think a lot of the administrative costs, the bureaucratic red tape, it costs money, and that tape is pretty expensive. So I think if we start looking at that, like where can we simplify the financial piece of it, we're going to find the money, right? And then we can start looking at how do we do this better, right? How can we drive this system to an approach where communities have more control over these systems?
It's interesting to think about the potentiality of remanaging a system like that, because it is such a big system, right?
Yeah.
And saying, okay, prove value. I mean, prove value. Everybody in the building, what do you do? How do you do it? Who do you do it for? And what kind of value do you actually add here? And whenever I think about this line of questioning, like we end up in the office work scenario where the consultants come in and they're like, how do you help the company? Right. And and we're supposed to talk about that. But I think when we lose sight of public education has a customer base, and that customer base is first and foremost our students. And then secondly, the families, right, that are relying on those students to have a safe environment, to have a place where they can learn, a place where they can grow so that they will be productive citizens of the country, right? So we do have customers in the public school system. And rather than thinking about them as such and serving them in that way, there seems to be this adversarial relationship between parents and students and the teachers and administrators who are meant to serve them. And so I think you're right to say like, hey, let's go in here and remanage this situation. And let's talk instead about how we can reach common goals. Because right now it seems like they're incentivized in two different directions.
Well, and I think too, we can talk about standardized testing, right? Like teachers, not only are our students being measured on these standardized tests, I hate them. I hate standardized
Mm.
testing. And I always
Yeah,
tell
me
my
too.
kids' teachers, if they want to have a meeting about their test scores, don't bother, because I don't care. I literally could
Yeah.
not care less. Because I have one child who tests exceptionally well. I have one child who tests horribly, and they don't fit in the same box, right?
Mhm.
But teachers are measured on that as well, and I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. But something else that I would really like to see, when we talk about these community solutions and community approaches within our campaign, and those approaches to the solutions for these things, one of the things I would really like to see is the community getting more involved with the schools. We're very fortunate where we live, that our schools, we have a very big community presence. A lot of businesses support our schools. And our kids never want or need for anything in their schools. Even though it's a public school, our communities really do step in and help out. But something that I would really like to see, anybody who knows me knows that I'm a huge advocate for trades. I don't think we should be pushing kids toward college. I think we should certainly talk to them about it. That is an option. We need doctors, we need lawyers, we need businessmen and women, we need all of the things. We need scientists and all of it. But we also need plumbers. We also need electricians. We need
Mhm.
HVAC guys and gals. We need welders. We need auto mechanics. I mean, these are people that we need in our
Mhm.
society. And there's a shortage of these people because we have spent the last couple of decades telling kids that they have to go to college to be successful. And that simply is not true. And
Mhm.
so I would really like to see more of those community partnerships with schools where, um, there are trade programs that are offered to them as, instead of certain curriculum, right? Because if a kid knows that they're not ready to go to college, that they don't want to go to college, they know they want to be a plumber or a welder or an electrician. Why can't they go ahead and get a head start on that, right? But like BMW is here in the upstate where I live. That would be a great opportunity. BMW could partner with with certain schools to offer apprenticeships where kids can go and get some on the job type training in various areas. And when they come out of school, they have a job, like,
Yeah.
why can't we talk about these things as options for kids so that we're giving them the best education possible based on what their needs are, based on what they want to do?
And it's not necessarily just trades when we think about the skilled labor like HVAC and
Mm,
mechanics and things like that. It's not necessarily just trades. Sometimes we're talking about customer service representatives,
yeah.
right? And sometimes it's a matter of paralegals and people who can do administrative work, people
Mhm.
who can do social media work, right? If you're really good in the digital space, that's a skill. It's a
Yeah.
skill to be able to post to social media, to understand how social media works, right? And you don't have to do 4 years worth of marketing to understand how to run a good, strong social media campaign. So there's a
Right.
lot of jobs right now that are considered to be maybe post college jobs that don't really need the college education
Mhm.
piece to be good jobs in our workforce and to be paid as good jobs in the workforce. So I'm with you on that. I'm definitely a big fan of apprenticeship programs and the
Mhm.
possibility of helping people earn usable degrees and usable skills, usable certificates, things that are going to pay off for them and are going to help them make a life for themselves and make themselves more financially independent.
Yeah.
To that end, what about business owners, people who'd like to start their own business, entrepreneurs, the possibility of having a side hustle? What are the barriers that you see to some of the things to that as far as our state is concerned? And what do you think the governor's office could do to remove some of those barriers?
Business licensing and occupational licensing are huge barriers. Um, and it's a hard conversation to have. Maybe not necessarily the business license piece of that, because that's often handled at the municipal level, right? So that is something that a municipality can decide not to do, and they should decide not to do that. But with occupational licensing, you often get the argument that, well, if we don't have this in place, how do we know that, these people are going to be responsible, right? For instance, cosmetologists, right? If someone wants to braid hair as their means of providing for their family, they have to get a license to do it. They have to go to, cosmetology school and get a license to do this. Why? That's silly. Like that by itself, like that instance is the one that I always go to because it's the easiest, I think, to understand why it's so ridiculous.
Well, especially because those people build their business on word of mouth.
Yeah.
They don't go in and put their name in the phone book and somebody looks them up and finds them there. They build their business on word of mouth.
If they're doing this and
is because they were successful.
Yeah. And if they're doing this and they have a bad reputation because they're doing it in their home and their home is unsanitary, like that word is going to get out and people aren't going to give them their business. Right.
Right.
But when we talk about this licensing, it's important to note that, let's say this is someone who is the best hair braider on the block, right? Best hair braider on the block. And let's say she's a single mom. She's got 2 kids, single mom, doing her best to support her family. And she could very easily make more than enough to support her family doing this. But the fees to start up her business that would otherwise be nothing because she can do this out of her house, stop her from doing that. Because when you start talking about, let's say the fee is $100 right now, with groceries and gas being what they are, the price that they are, I mean, that's the difference between feeding your family for a week and starting a business. And people can't always do that. And so I think looking at those as barriers, I think is a huge, huge thing.
And it's not just the one-time fee. It's not just the one-time fee
right.
either.
It's usually annual.
And then there's continuing education hours that go along with it. And this is a little bit like what we were talking about with the Panthers conversation. This is people using government to exclude others, to create higher barriers to entry in specific markets and specific fields so that they can reduce the amount of competition that they have to put up with. So I'm not saying that there was a hair braider who went out there and said, like, let me lobby the government and get this rule put in place. But from a cosmetology perspective, right, cosmetology schools make money off of being able to sell people licenses, right, or train them to get their licenses. And then, the occupational permitting and the licenses drive, they force the market to look a certain way because the barriers to entry are so high. And so when government does that, when they support those kinds of things, they are raising the barriers to entry. They're preventing people from being able to build a business of their own. And I'm with you. That's one of the biggest detriments right now that we have to people being able to be financially independent.
Well, some of the events that we went to, because we went to a lot of local events on our campaign trail, and we would ask local vendors what their, biggest challenges were in those settings. And one thing we learned is that these vendors have to get a business, was it a business license in every place that they go to be a part of these festivals? So every city they go to
at the barbecue.
Whatever.
At the barbecue. And he
but
said he had to get a permit.
There were others. Yeah, there were others that I talked to who said the same thing. Yeah. But there's, when we talk about the occupational licensing piece and everyone, the concern, the shared concern, general concern, common concern, that there's not going to be any sort of regulation of these businesses because these are businesses that could have higher risks, right? The free market can do that, right? You have professional organizations that can do that, because if you have a group of people who form a professional organization and they have their own certification process, they have a good reputation, then when you get certified, that's going to give you that credibility, right? And that organization is going to make sure that you keep up your end of the deal because they don't want their reputation tarnished. And so it's a cycle, but it's self-regulation, right? And it's you don't have to do it, but it's a good thing to do it because you get the benefit of using that certification. So,
Well, then you see too that pricing and things like that, you can charge more if you have certain certifications, right? You can, I remember my aunt was a hairdresser for a long time and she had some kind of vendor certification on color.
Mhm.
She was some type of like a Paul, somebody color specialist, right? And so
Yeah,
they can pay for those additional things where they get additional training and they have additional certifications. And then you go
right.
and see somebody, they can charge more for those kinds of things. But that's all business decisions that individual business owners get to make.
Hmm.
They shouldn't be government regulated pieces put in place to prevent people from being able to deliver services and make money.
Yeah. And two, if I want to pay my neighbor to cut and color my hair, and she is willing to do it, and whatever I offer to pay her, and she's okay with receiving that money, the government has no place anywhere in that transaction. Nowhere.
Which
Not in
brings us
her
to
ability
taxation.
not in her ability to provide me that service, not in my ability to receive that service from her, and nowhere in that exchange of money should the government be involved.
Which brings us to taxation. This is one of the biggest barriers to people being able to
Hmm.
create a side hustle, being able to earn money on the side, is that the height of which those enterprises are taxed, right? The level at which we see individuals having to pay for those side hustle businesses in sales tax. Sorry, one of our comments. I'm an auto tech. I don't have a license. Not saying I should, but an auctioneer does. Yeah,
Hmm.
auctioneers are my favorite example of this. Whenever we get into the business licensing, the permitting and stuff, is that you have to go through the South Carolina Department of Labor to get licensed as an auctioneer, which I've just never really understood because
That makes no
I don't
sense.
like, I mean, how many
Not at
auctioneers
all.
do we even really have, right? Like that's like saying, oh, I have a friend who runs she's a mermaid. She's a performing mermaid. She also runs a health safety company. Like her job is to teach people how to be safe around swimming pools and things like that,
Mhm.
teach people basic swimming lessons, life-saving skills, things like that. But on the side, as part of her marketing efforts, she's a performing mermaid. There's no reason in the world that this mermaid needs to have a license to be a mermaid in the state of
Right.
South Carolina, right? There are two of them in the entire state. There's no
Yeah.
reason that she should have to do that. Same with auctioneers. I don't know. It's a skill. So let's talk about the taxation piece, though, because that is another prohibitive piece. And
Mm.
one of our gubernatorial candidates right now is campaigning on reducing income taxes, specifically state income taxes. And I would like to get your take on that. And of course, as libertarians, we tend to be in the anti-taxation bracket almost all the time, ever. But if you think about it as a barrier to entry, as preventing people from being able to do what they can to take care of their family, why don't you come at it from that angle in terms of like taxes aren't just bad because they're bad because dot dot dot.
Well, they take a significant amount from your paycheck.
Yeah.
And if you're a business owner, you're paying a lot of taxes. I mean, it's a lot. And if you employ people, you're paying even more taxes because you have to pay payroll taxes. So, yeah, it's pretty costly. With regard to campaigning on, because he wants to eliminate the state income tax, which, let me be perfectly clear, I'm all for that. I would love that. I would love to see property taxes go away too, because if you're paying taxes, you're basically paying rent to the government for your house. You don't own it if you're paying taxes, but that's neither here nor there. But I want to be clear. No one person has the power to do away with the state income tax. Just going to throw that out there. We don't want any one single person or position to have that much power, right? That's the whole point of having three branches of government. Which maybe if we had civics curriculum like that private school in Charleston, people might understand.
We would know that.
Anyway, I digress. But yeah, so when we start talking about doing away with income tax, that's a really good conversation to have. But the conversation should not immediately be like, we're going to eliminate the income tax. Sure, we can work toward that, but how, right? And that's when we start looking at auditing all of these state agencies like the DOT. Let's look at the Department of Education. Let's look at, there are so many. I mean, there are just so many government agencies and government offices. So let's look at where the money is being spent, because the first step is to reduce cost, right? So we reduce the cost of running the government and see how much it actually costs to run a reasonably sized government. And then we go from there, because once we're able to do that, we're able to look at, okay, how much of this is actually necessary versus how much of it is actually lining the pockets of businesses that have government contracts and, politicians and things like that. So
And
I'm
there's,
not,
oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, so I love the conversation. I definitely think it's one we need to have. I just think we need to be a little bit more honest and transparent about how we get there, because it's not oh, I'm the governor, there goes the income tax. It's not that simple. It's not that simple.
Truth. That's 100% true. So I'm interested in this, what you're talking about, going through each of the agencies and auditing, like, how is this money being spent? What does this look like? Because this is at the heart of the campaign message, which is remanage the state, right?
Yeah.
Remanage the state. And businesses have two types of costs. They have their fixed costs, which are the things they can't do anything about. This is the stuff we have to pay day in, day out, month in, month out. These are the fixed costs of running our business. It could be something like your rent for your retail location, or it could be the amount of maintenance you pay on the trucks that are in your fleet, right? So those fixed costs are things that the company expects to spend. And then there are variable costs, and the variable costs are the things that you can actually eliminate, or you can reduce, or you can substitute out, right? Like, you can find another way to spend that money.
Right.
So I'm interested in, like, looking at the government and saying, okay, agency, give us your fixed cost, right? And give us your variable costs, and let's parse those out so we understand why we're spending, $750,000 a year for a software subscription. When we know what that software can do, we can get at a lower rate from a lower vendor, and then start looking at, how to do a better job managing those fixed costs and how to do a better job of reducing those variable costs. So I think you're exactly onto something when you think about, like, hey, let's go in and remanage these organizations and figure out exactly what we're going to be spending. And that transparency piece, where you as lieutenant governor could lead those conversations and then have transparency. Here's what we talked about at the DOT today. Here's what we talked about at the Department of Education today. Here's how we got into the nitty gritty of this today, because you have an operations background. This is what you do for the company.
It's what I do. It's what I do every day. And it's not just the variable costs that we want to look at. Like, let's look at those fixed costs too. Like, are they really fixed?
Yep.
Can we maybe do away with some of it? Because government, I am not an anarchist. There are a lot of anarchists in the liberty movement and the Libertarian Party. I am not an anarchist. I'm a minarchist. I do think there is a place for a small government, because I think the government does have some position in our society, right? There is some benefit to having a small government, but our government is too big. It's too big. And there's no reason that we should be paying as much as we're paying as taxpayers, because I have a feeling that if we really got in there and looked at those books, I have a feeling there's a lot of cooking going on in that kitchen.
Yeah. I have a feeling there's a lot of things they're buying that they didn't get the best deal on, and they just didn't know how to negotiate. Or even contracts that they were told they needed to award that they awarded, and then they never bothered to actually spend because they never actually did the work. I think there's a lot of programs that they continue to perpetuate that don't have the results that they need to have.
Yep.
So yeah, I think
Well, programs that could
100%
be, and when we talk about this too, looking at those programs and seeing how can this be done at the community level as opposed to being government controlled. Like, how do we give this back to the community so that communities can take care of themselves as opposed to the state doing everything for them? It's very important, I think.
Yeah, and to me, to help kind of build the vision of what that would look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say you're in an organization and you say, okay, here's a project or a program that we have that's continuously underperforming because we just don't have the funding to support it inside our state agency. Now let's find an organization outside that can take this project and we can teach them what we know, right? We can help make the connections in the community for them. We can help them. We can give our funding, right, in the form of grants to these community organizations to be able to do those things. And then they don't necessarily have to worry about well, that's the wrong rabbit hole. Sorry. I just saw Janie wants to know where Flopsy is.
Oh my gosh,
That
I
was very
forgot to go
distracting,
get him.
Janie.
I totally, and I forgot him the other night too. He's in the bedroom. I,
Flopsy's in the house, Janie, but not on the live stream.
yeah,
Sorry. It's like a
sorry.
false promise. Maybe he'll be on the live stream for Tuesday night.
I'll go get
Yeah.
him
So
before
anyway,
we wrap up so he can make an appearance.
yeah, that would be good. That would be good. I think the idea there, though, of the remanaging, right? There are going to be programs that you see that are valuable programs in concept, but they're
Mm-hmm.
being mismanaged in
Mm-hmm.
a state agency. So let's go find some private partners that we can put together that are willing to take that project on and then
Mm-hmm.
potentially grow that project in the
Mm-hmm.
private sector.
Yeah.
I think that's a great approach. Yeah, I think you're onto something with that. This is a live Q&A, and we've had no Qs. It's been mostly A's. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Actually, from Janie. So, Jessica, with everything going on with higher education student loans, do you have any advice for the younger generation for life after high school?
Explore all of your options. It's not just college. College is not the only option that you have. And if your parents won't talk to you about it, if your guidance counselor won't talk to you about it, find somebody who will. Or use the internet. I mean, we have like the whole world at our fingertips these days, right? But yeah, I think I would just say don't feel like you have to go to college. And I say that as somebody who did, because I was the first person in my family to have the opportunity to go to college. And even though I know if I had decided not to, my family would have supported that decision. They definitely would have. But I felt like I needed to. I felt like it was an opportunity that I could not say no to, but I wish I had. I do wish I had, because I think I could have done a lot more for my career a lot sooner if I had gone to a technical school and then explored my options from there. But there are so many other options, like we discussed. There are trades. There are, you can go to a technical school and get a 2-year degree. And that's what I have. I have a paralegal degree, and then I built my own career from there, just based on what I was really good at, and I found opportunities to use the skills that I had and build on those. And so, I wish guidance counselors did a better job of presenting all these opportunities and actually guiding kids toward what they're passionate about or good at. But
It's interesting. So I think there's two big issues on the guidance counselor side. Number one, Holly's guidance counselor has 300 students.
yeah,
And it's just her. So that piece is a big part of it. Like they just don't have the 1-to-1 skill, like 1-to-5, right? Or 1-to-10.
yeah.
So she can't serve her customers quite as
Mm-hmm.
well as she could if there were more of her. And then the other is, and this is my students' experience, this is the university, is that their guidance people don't have familiarity with their major.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know what the major classes are. They don't know what the opportunities for careers are. And so you don't have a guidance specialist. So if you were somebody who I think that we might be doing a better job of this at Blythewood now, but if you were a specialist in digital businesses, right? And so here comes this kid that's got a whole bunch of talent in the digital space. And you'd be like, wow, okay, well, look at all these careers that are available to you in digital businesses. And I know that because I'm the specialist with that kind of background. So we don't really align guidance counselors with any like real area of specialty that says, look, kids that are really good at art and music, y'all come with me and I'll help you find your art and music careers and help you find your art and music programs after school and things like that. They don't really do that with them. Instead, I think they're very arbitrarily assigned, like by last name.
Well, and I think this would be a really good opportunity for community involvement as well, right? Because if you've got temp agencies and things, businesses like that would be willing to go in and do these career type counseling or career guidance type services for kids, that would be a really good way for the community to support that.
Yeah, they could do assessments. They could come in and give students assessments and help them identify where their skills are and what opportunities might be for them in those skills.
Yeah.
All right. So Janie says November is a month of thankfulness. What are you most thankful for, Jessica Ethridge?
I'm thankful for a lot of things. I am thankful for a lot of things. I'm thankful for my family. I am thankful for my job. I'm thankful for my car, like just having a car. I mean, I'm thankful for, I think about it every day. I do. I try every morning to think of 3 things that I'm thankful for, because I think it starts the day off in a good mindset. But I'm thankful for my friends, all of my LP friends and all of my other friends, my church family. I'm thankful for all the things. Yeah, I'm thankful for a lot. And I'm very thankful for Flopsy. And I'm also thankful to you, Janie, for answering your questions, asking your questions to be answered.
You got another question related to Flopsy. Would you change the state animal from white-tailed deer to Flopsy, or would you leave that to the voters?
That would have to be left to the voters, but I suspect that Flopsy would quickly win the hearts of every South Carolinian. He's pretty special.
The state rabbit.
The state rabbit, yeah, mascot. He's my my business mascot. Every Friday, I put him in my email to my employees. He is sporting one of his outfits, so he is. He's a little celebrity, and he travels with me when I travel for work meetings. He'll go with me, and he's a pretty big hit among the clients too. So,
what are some other things you would leave to the voters aside from state animal that traditional politicians decide for the people?
I would like to say that I would really like to see abortion be something that is presented to the people of South Carolina, for them to make the decision on. But I also feel very strongly that the government has no place in that decision. So that's kind of a tough one, I think. But I do think at the end of the day, it should be something that we discuss as a state, and not something that just a group of people in Columbia get to decide for us. I think that, tax reform is something that's really important, that the people should be able to weigh in on, just like we vote on, like we have 2, I think, on the ballot on Tuesday, 2 things that raise the budget. So stuff like that, I think, is really important, that we allow citizens, anything that impacts them directly, impacts their pocketbook. I think they should have a say. Yeah, that's all I can think of off the top of my head.
What about decriminalization of marijuana?
That's a big
cannabis?
one. Yeah, that's
You
an
think the
important
state
one.
should make that choice?
Yeah, because there's no reason that it should be criminalized at this point. I mean, we've had, plenty of discussion around it. There is enough research that shows its benefits and use in clinical settings for medicinal use. And I mean, aside from that, it's not bothering anybody else. I mean, there's no reason that someone should be in jail for, possessing or using or whatever this drug. It's just, I can't even comprehend why it's still illegal. So I think that
it's pretty archaic.
Yeah, I think that we should immediately work toward decriminalization. I think the first step is to allow it for medical use in clinical settings. And I think we should work toward decriminalization and the pardon of anybody who is in jail for offenses related to cannabis.
Agreed. There's a lot of sort of old school politics that are slowing that thing down.
Yeah.
The website, selp.org, is up on your screen right now. And the reason I'm showing that is that we just had a post from our Legislative Affairs Committee that talks about these 2 amendments that Jessica mentioned that are on the ballot right now. And so the first one is Article 3 of the Constitution of the state to be amended to provide for the General Reserve Fund. A yes vote increases the amount of money the state government will keep from 5% to 7%. And so we built an analysis out there. What lawmakers basically want to do is hide a budget surplus instead of returning the money back to its rightful owners. $440 million of South Carolinians' hard-earned money was locked away as of July 1st, 2021 in the state's General Reserve Fund. So they're hoarding money in this fund. While they continually talk about not having money to do this or to do that, there is these gigantic surpluses. This basically works out right now to about $85 per resident. And our position as the Libertarian Party is that $85 per resident should be returned to the citizens instead of sitting there simply earning money. So that's one of the amendments out there. Anything to say on that, Jessica, as far as the collection of taxes and then the non-spending of those taxes?
Taxation is theft.
Well said.
Plain and simple. Plain and simple. I mean, yeah, I think that's part of that audit process, right? Like looking at where is the money, because there's no reason that the state should be holding that much money, nor should any of its agencies be holding that much money. I'm looking at you, DOT.
The other is the similar, only this time it's the Capital Reserve Fund. And in this case, it increases the ability for the state to withhold more money from 2% to 3%. At current, it's 184, almost $184 million in the Capital Reserve Fund, which is about 55 cents per resident of South Carolina. And so the question there is whether or not we should allow them to withhold even more money or maintain budget reins on the money that they do have. What do you say, Jessica? Yay or nay?
Why would we give them more money? I just don't understand why we would want to give them more money.
I'm struggling to understand why they need to withhold more money when they haven't even spent the money that they have. So I'm kind of there as far as that's concerned.
Meanwhile, have you seen the condition of our roads? Like,
Yeah.
where is this money going?
The allocation of the money, right? The idea that they're raising money for specific things and, well, we can't spend it on other things because we raised it for this specific thing. And now they're asking, can we put more money into a fund that already has so much money in it that we haven't been able to spend all that money that we already have? Like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, other than it is, in fact, non-transparent fundraising and spending.
Yeah. Well, and isn't it, I mean, it's discretionary, right? Like, it's discretionary, right?
Yes.
So it's not like it is created in a way that does not allow for transparency.
Intentionally.
Right.
So that they can spend it on what they want to spend it on.
Right.
Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm just going to throw this out there. Visits from the Carolina Panthers cheerleaders. Just going to put that out there. So how do you feel about the gas tax plan, Jessica? I'm not familiar with the gas tax plan, so I can't elaborate on that. Maybe Janie, you could give us a little bit more details on the gas tax plan. And then David Morris says they don't need more money. They haven't spent the gas tax money they have already raised. So maybe kind of going along the lines with what Dr. Morris says, it could in fact be that they're planning to raise more money through gas taxes.
Well, I know that they just increased because when it was created in a way that it increased over time, right? So we recently had an increase, and that's what had everybody up in a kerfuffle a couple months back, I think. And so,
that's what Janie says. The gas tax that was approved that apparently is going to keep going up every year.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't. I mean, we pay every other tax known to man. Why are we paying more gas tax? It doesn't make sense.
Well, and at the end of the day, this is a tax that hurts our less fortunate. This is a tax that hurts poor people. It hurts them because they can't afford to put the gas in their car to be able to go.
Gas is already expensive enough. Yeah. I mean, and you're going to add to it.
Because it raises the price of public transportation, because gas extends the price of public transportation. This is not a fair tax. This is a use tax that taxes a specific group of people. It's not okay.
Agreed.
Not okay, in my opinion. Well, of course, then we had the whole conversation about taxation in general. Not okay.
I will say though, if there are going to be taxes, I think consumption taxes are better. But I think that those are only acceptable if we don't have income tax, property taxes, and that sort of thing. Because you're just taking money everywhere, every way you can from citizens, because you're taking it out of their paycheck. Then you're taking it from them on the homes and the cars that they've bought with money that's already been taxed. Right. I mean, so.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think if you're going to tax income, that money has already been taxed, period.
Mm-hmm.
So then every time they go to spend it, if you tax it in all those different places that they're spending it, every bit of our money is double taxed.
Yeah, all
In
of it.
some cases, triple taxed. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with you on that. And the idea that I'm with you. I don't have a problem with sales tax. I'll pay a higher sales tax for concert tickets. I'll pay a higher sales tax for t-shirts, sweatshirts, the lamp that I use to do our live streams, all these things that I buy for my purposes. I'll be willing to pay more on sales tax for those if they'll stop taxing me at the outset on what I
Yeah.
earn.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm with you on that. Jeannie wants to know what the first thing you will be once you win the election.
Asleep, because I'm going to take a nap. I need a nap. I don't know. What do you mean? What's the first thing I'm going to be?
I think
Happy.
first,
I'd be
I think
excited.
I think first actions is her question. I probably should have portrayed it a little bit better. First actions. And I think, when I think about the idea of these coalitions, you would have 4 years to be able to build these
Mhm.
coalitions. You would have 4 years to help people understand what the vision of community built government really does look like. And so I would think that that would be the first and foremost is like, come one, come all. Anybody who wants to have a conversation, let's
Yeah.
sit down. So
Yeah.
maybe a list might be that first in order.
Yeah. I would bring all of my resources to the table. Every relationship that I have, every person that I know across, all industries, I would pull them all together and figure out where do we need to start? Where do we start? One of the cool things about campaigning is that I've gotten to meet a lot of different people and people from, every pocket of the state. And so it would be really cool to bring everybody to the table and look at what do you need in this area? What does this area have that can help you? What are the problems? What are some solutions? Like, let's start really working on this and then have those folks go back to their communities, because working with community leaders is going to be, I think, the key to getting the message out to the communities and getting involved with them and getting that visibility and getting plugged in. And so I think, figuring out, who do I know already who can help with that? Who do we need to know? And let's bring them all to the table. Let's get a game plan together and let's get started.
Yep.
Let's roll up our sleeves and let's get started. Let's figure out what we got to do first. And I think Bruce would probably agree with that. I think that's his approach as well. So we share a lot of that enthusiasm for bringing everybody together and tackling this as a whole, not just as politicians, because neither of us are politicians. We're just people. I mean, we're people who love our communities and we love the state that we live in. I mean, we're both from here. We're both natives. And so we know that South Carolina has a lot of potential. We know how great the people are, and we want to help make a difference. So
Agreed. Dr. Morris thinks the first thing you do after you get elected is to look at the news media and say, quote, "You provided no coverage for the person who won the election," end quote.
well,
We don't disagree with you, Dr. Morris.
yeah.
It'll be interesting to see about these kinds of things.
Mhm.
When you think about the sort of the rigged game, right? That's been the second theme in this election, has been that, Democrats are complaining that our democracy is at stake and Republicans are complaining that the elections are rigged. And the truth is both of those things are true, and they're true
Mhm.
because of the Democrats and the Republicans, right?
Yeah.
Preventing third-party candidates from getting any kind of coverage, preventing real challenge to their ideas, preventing real options and choices in front of the electorate. And so, I think it's not. What has been the hardest part? Let me ask you that. That's probably the question I'm trying to get to, is what has been the hardest part of getting out there and talking about, hi, I'm Jessica and I'm running for lieutenant governor?
It has been the media and the exposure, because people don't know who we are because nobody covers us. And I don't think that there is, I don't think there's any active involvement necessarily from the Republican Party or the Democrat Party in the media shutting us out. I think the media does that on their own, right? They have their own agenda. But I do think that they have some responsibility in this because they're not actively standing against it. And one of the things that I actually pointed out, I tweeted Joe Cunningham about his shenanigans with the chicken. Henrietta McMaster, I think is what he named the chicken, this poor chicken that he, anyway. If you all really care about the integrity of our electoral process, you would be calling for us to be involved. I'm speaking directly to you, McMaster, Cunningham, all of you. If you cared about the integrity of our electoral process, if you cared about serving the state of South Carolina, you would call for all options to be on those stages. You would call for all options to be covered in the media. You would use your platform to make sure that everybody knows it is not okay to black out candidates who are on the ballots. Because the only criteria for being involved in any debate, the only criteria for being included in any news media is that we are on the ballot, and we are. And that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I agree. And amen to that. As Beck said, amen. All right. I'm gonna go with one more because I've kept you out here for an hour. But this one comes from Janie as well. What is your favorite locally owned business? So you're in the upstate. You got a place in the upstate, but you also have you're down in Beaufort a good bit as well. So I'll give you two. You can do one up in the Greer area and one down in Beaufort.
I'm not gonna do it. There are too many. Too many. Too many. I can't do it. I won't do it. Small businesses, local owned businesses are the lifeblood of our economy. And they should all be valued for the contributions they make to our economy and to their communities because, they do a lot more than people realize. So I will not choose a favorite. I appreciate anybody who is willing to put in that work to be a locally owned small business.
So what I hear you saying is that for the right money in your next campaign, they can fundraise to be named Jessica Ethridge official favorite locally owned chicken restaurant.
I cannot be bought.
Favorite locally owned.
I cannot be bought.
No
Nope.
fundraising. Okay.
I cannot be bought. Nope. But I will give a shout out to a couple of really cool community organizations that we have here in the upstate. When we talk about voluntary solutions, there are a lot. I cannot name them all, but two that I want to give a special hat tip to, two that are very close to my heart. Greer Relief, and they do a lot of poverty support. They provide career services. They have a lot of different programs. They've got a food bank, but their goal is to help people in that cyclical poverty, to help people pull themselves up. They're giving them tools and resources to be able to do that and trying to support them as best they can. And then also there's an organization here in Greenville called Reaching Our Youth Upstate. It's a girl I went to high school with and her husband. They're doing amazing things with kids. They do tutoring after school, summer programs and that sort of thing, but they're giving kids some really incredible opportunities who may not otherwise have them. And so I did want to give a little shout out to those two because they're just kind of a little special to me. So
appreciate that. We are still actively raising money for the 2022 campaign. Of course, Tuesday is election day. Thank you, Jessica, for giving us time on Sunday before election day. I put in the chat the link to the sclp.org/donate, where you can go and choose to be a supporter of the South Carolina Libertarian Party. We broadcasted this on Jessica's Facebook page, but also on Parenting Porcupines. So those of you who are out there anxiously awaiting a new season of Parenting Porcupines, don't you worry. After the election is over, Jessica and Melissa and I will be back here talking once again about all things libertarian moms wise. And just as always, I'm so grateful to you for putting your name out there and for being willing to talk about these issues with the public, with our voters here in South Carolina. You're doing the good work of Liberty, Jessica Ethridge, and I'm grateful to you.
Well, I'm grateful for your support.
Thanks, everybody. You can continue to ask questions on Jessica's Facebook page, and she'll answer them as she's able to. And are you doing another live stream on Election Day? Or we haven't confirmed that yet?
Yes, I believe we'll be going live from the election night party. So,
all right, election night party in Greenville up at Steve and Libby Dasbach's house. So that link is in the most recent post on your webpage. And then we also have an election party in the Midlands, which will be at Beef O'Brady's on Hardscrabble Road beginning at 8 p.m. on Tuesday night for the election results. And there's an election watch party down in the Low Country hosted by our good friend Melissa. Hopefully we're all taking Parenting Porcupines literature with us and passing that stuff out.
you have all the
Shameless
stickers.
plug.
You have
Shameless
all
plug.
the stickers, yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's true. All right, it's good to see you, and take care. Have a good rest of your night.
Yep, y'all too. Thanks.